Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live event. My name is Shoaib Malik, and I'm one of the co-organizers of the community for MENA of Science and Religion. In addition to that, I'm working with my colleagues behind the scenes to develop a variety of things that can hopefully facilitate the conversation of science and religion in Middle East and North Africa. One of those events is this seminar that we'd like to showcase today. And we have two very exciting speakers. But before I get to them, I would like to just take a few minutes just to talk about why we created this network and what are its objectives and what you can get involved with. So, the field of science or religion has been growing steadily over the past few decades. But we do realize, acknowledge that Islam and science, and just generally, developments within the Middle East are still budding. And to kind of facilitate conversations about science, religion in this particular territory, wherein you have multiple ethnicities, different religious communities, we wanted to foster a network that could allow collaborations, porosity, and accessibility. And so, to this effect, we came together and we developed this so that hopefully we can showcase different works by different people all across the world. And to that effect, we have people representing different parts of the world, and we're all looking into very different territories of science and religion. So that's what we're trying to do as a network. With regards to some of our activities, we've had a couple of online seminars before. This is the second one. And we also have a call for papers. Currently, we have a CFP that is circulating in the digital space. So if you want to check them out, you can find our Facebook link or go on our Twitter page. And we are currently inviting applications for either graduate papers or recently published papers that could be considered for winning an award of £1,000 and potentially up to £3,000. These papers have to be within the remit of science or religion, and we give priority and preferences to papers that are developed within the MENA region or are about the MENA region. So please do consider submitting those. Hopefully, you'll find the link in the description box below, or we'll hopefully share it at some point soon. But that's something that's coming up, and the deadline is close. So do consider applying for that. Without further ado, I'd now like to move on to the seminar today. We have two very exciting speakers talking about the historical perspectives of science and religion. The way we have organized today's webinar is we have the first speaker, Dr. Ceren, and I do apologize in advance for mispronouncing any terms. Dr. Jörg will be speaking in the first segment. We will then follow this up with Dr. Jörg Matthias in the second segment. And then we'll have a third segment in which we'll open the floor to any questions that all of you may have. So please note down your questions, jot them down. You can send them to us through the chat, and then hopefully we will go ahead and present them to the presenters. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Ceren just to give you an overview of her background. Dr. Ceren Rasimoğlu, and again, I apologize if I mispronounced that name, is an assistant professor at the Department of Sociology. And again, I'm gonna mess this up, at Abdülkadir Mehmet Ali University. This is the reason I think people wanted me to host. They wanted me to mispronounce these terms, right? Sorry. So she received her MA and PhD from Bogazici University, Atatürk Institute of Modern Turkish History, with her thesis on the history of tuberculosis and the professionalization of physicians in the late Ottoman Empire. She received her PhD from Istanbul University, Department of Medical History and Ethics, on the activities of the Sisters Charity in the 19th century Ottoman Empire. So if you're interested in this as much as I am, let's open the floor to Dr. Ceren. The floor is all yours, Dr. Ceren.
Thank you. They were not mispronouncing. Okay, thank you with the good pronouncing. Okay, and I also thank you for everyone at the team for giving me the opportunity to talk about the Sisters of Charity and my research. Now I'm going to talk. You have talked about my CV, so this research is done for my dissertation, PhD dissertation. And I really am interested in how the Sisters of Charity had an impact in healthcare in the Ottoman Empire. That is why I wanted to learn more about them. So now I am going to present my, if I can, how do I share my PowerPoint? This is my question at the moment. Okay, is there anyone who can help me with? Yes, I click on present and then and choose the slides or share screen. I'm choosing the slides. Okay, add from my computer, upload file. Is that true?
Yeah, it will. Yeah, if you upload the file, it'll take a couple of minutes. There's another option. You can just view the file as it is. Have you opened up the file, the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, so click on share or
okay.
present.
Present.
If you
okay.
on share screen.
Okay.
Now there should be options at the top, like desktop application. Right? If you click on
share a screen. Yes. Now, have I been able to show my screen?
Yes, it's come up. Perfect.
Okay. Okay. So now you can see my Sisters of Charity. I think. Okay. So I'm just going to read a small part from a memoir. Okay. So in Galata, I think there is the biggest fish market in the world. All the vagabonds of Istanbul flock here. These men are very rude and dangerous when they are drunk. The sisters of Saint Vincent de Paul, whose mother house is in Galata, can go out on the streets whenever they want without fear. Everyone respects the veil they wear on their heads. Once I went to visit the sisters with my chambermaid and a servant. And on the way back, they wanted to come with us to take us through potentially dangerous places. But how will you return afterwards? She asked. Don't worry, they said. We are not afraid. We can walk everywhere with our dress on. And this is the dress that you can see in the picture. So Durand de Fortmine, the nephew of the French ambassador, was talking about the Sisters of Charity, the Catholic Sisters of Charity. And you can see the dress that she was describing. Okay, it is no coincidence that a researcher who is talking, who is trying to understand things about past medical healthcare, okay, can come across. It is not a surprise that they can come across to the names of these Sisters of Charity in the late Ottoman Empire. So that was my case too. So I just wondered what else can I learn from them? Because I came across their names everywhere that I was looking for about healthcare in especially late 19th century. So today I'm going to, okay, can you see? Okay, I'm going to present the health services offered by the Filles de la Charité, the Sisters of Charity, between 1839 and 1914, because they left the country, they started to leave the country with the outbreak of World War I, because of the relations between France and the Ottoman Empire. And for my research, I used the documents of the Prime Minister Ottoman archives and the Annales de la Congrégation de la Mission, the annals of the congregation of the Lazarists, to whom the sisters were affiliated. And here you can see the sisters, one of the Sisters of Charity with Laonek, the famous Laonek. This is a picture that you can find in lots of hospitals and pictures and photographs that you can find in different hospitals in Europe and in the Ottoman Empire. They worked in the main hospitals of France of Europe and of the Middle and Near East and the past Ottoman lands. So the annals are formed of the letters and reports written by the Lazarist priests and the Sisters of Charity to the central or to the center of the Lazarist, the Paris-based central. So the Eastern missions were covered the Middle and Near East, and the province of Constantinople, that was what they were calling them, included actually the western parts of the Ottoman Empire. So the Istanbul mission, the Constantinople mission, was the starting point of the Catholic Sisters of Charity in the Ottoman Empire and in the East in general. So, actually, the founding of the Lazarists was done by Saint Vincent de Paul, and the affiliated congregation, the Sisters of Charity, was founded by Louis de Marillac, that you can see the paintings of. So the Filles de la Charité emerged in a century characterized by political, economic, and social catastrophes in the 16th and 17th century, where France was mostly at war, there were famines, poor harvests, high inflation, and eventually epidemics, which means there were masses that were in need of help in the 17th century. So in 1625, Saint Vincent de Paul founded the Lazarist congregation, and by 1773, the Lazarist congregation began to replace the Jesuits as the missionary extension to France, to the Eastern missions. And they started their missions in 1782. So in 1633, Louis de Marillac joined Saint Vincent de Paul to form a healing team. And that is how the Sisters of Charity were born. So different from other congregations, the Sisters of Charity were founded specifically, other than the other services, for health services. And they became a model for future congregations. So the congregation did not send its sisters to any hospital without a contract. They made vows, and they renewed their vows of humility and chastity every year. So they had the occasion to change their lives, but I see that they did not in general. So hundreds of contracts in the 17th century were signed between the members of the congregations and schools and hospitals in France, and this continued. This tradition of signing contracts continued in other places where the Sisters of Charity worked. So these women were able to fulfill the duties that all good hospitals demanded. So they basically ran the daily life of the hospitals. Of course, not the medical affairs, but they ran the daily life of the hospitals. They were good treasurers, staff administrators, so they dealt with other stuff in the institutions, basically the hospitals. They were dealing with housekeeping and basic patient care. So after at least 5 years of apprenticeship, they had the right to wear the habit of the congregation. So that is how they began to provide healthcare, and they were, of course, subordinate to the physicians. They knew basic surgical knowledge. They knew how to dress. They knew cupping. They knew using poultices. Some of them had scalpels. Some of them knew tooth extracting, but basically they knew basic pharmacy, especially the herbal pharmacy, and they were authorized to cook and distribute the food. I'm giving the details because these details can be applied to the Ottoman case. I'm going to show you the institutions that they worked in the Ottoman Empire, and they did all of these duties in the Ottoman institutions and in the Ottoman field institutions at times of epidemics and war. So the main task of these nursing communities was to maintain order at the beginning and care for the sick and the poor. So they adopted the concept of allocating separate beds for each patient, and they knew ward hygiene. They knew recording medications and special diets, and placing a chart at the bedside of each bed. So, which means they were the intermediaries of modern medical actors, between the modern medical actors and the modern medicine and the patients, the public. So, but there was a rivalry in France between the physicians and the Sisters of Charity. The physicians were accusing the sisters of being obscurantists, incompetent, negligent, etc. But we do not see a similar rivalry between these two groups in the Ottoman case and in the other parts of the world, because most probably these both the French physicians working outside France and the Sisters of Charity were feeling a kind of solidarity as opposed to the quote-unquote the noble sauvage. So because they were the carriers of the civilizing mission, and the French state was seeing the sisters as an instrument of both the civilizing mission and the dissemination of pastoral revolution. So it was only in the, as you can see in the picture, they were suppressed with the French Revolution, but with the Napoleonic age, with the revival of the religious life, then they began to be seen by Napoleon himself as an arm to the Eastern diplomacy. So, and also, which means they were supported by the French government. Also, at the same time, there was a bourgeoisie ethics and new bourgeois values, which underlined philanthropic activities, which enabled the new bourgeois to differentiate themselves from the other classes. So they were also supported by the new bourgeois too, and that was the same thing with the Ottoman Empire too. So they were supported by the Dames de la Charité in the Ottoman Empire, the beneficiary Catholic communities in the central Istanbul. So the guarantees of the sisters' presence in the Ottoman lands were the capitulations, the privileges given to the foreigners in the Ottoman Empire, and also the Tanzimat and Islahat ethics. Islahat ethics that promised equality before the law to all religions and ethnic groups, and also a law in 1867 enabled the foreigners to acquire property, which means they had been able to settle and buy and rent houses and hospitals in Istanbul and in other parts of the empire. So you can see the Lazarist missions in the Levant. So these missions have changed over time, but generally the Constantinople mission comprised these cities, these great cities that you can see here. So the sisters came in, as I said, in 1839 with the establishment of Marseille-Istanbul line. They arrived first of all to Istanbul and Izmir right before the enactment of the Tanzimat Edict, which means the guarantees of equality and freedom to everyone. They came to Istanbul. These were Madame Opperman and Madame Tournier, who were deemed to be too old to be apprentice. So the solution to this problem, so they were the new converts from Protestantism to Catholicism. So they wanted to be part of the Sisters of Charity. So the answer to them was that you can go to Istanbul and form a girls' school. If you are successful, then you are going to be able to be admitted to the congregation. That is what they did. They came to Istanbul and settled to Saint Benoît, the central house of the Lazarists in Istanbul, in the region of Galata. That's Duran de Fortmine is talking about. And they started to these missions. Okay, basically they were concentrated on health and education. So it is really difficult to separate these two missions in the Ottoman Empire. Even if we are talking about, let's say, an orphanage or a school without a hospital. These institutions had either a pharmacy or a dispensary, or they had some of the sisters working in these institutions were paying home visits for the poor and the sick. So again, health was overweighing education as a mission. And in all the institutions that I am going to show you now, we see almost all of these services: hospital or dispensary, pharmacy, home visits for vaccination and treatment, and some of them were opening soap kitchens. And we also see schools, orphanage, and we see workshops in most of the institutions, either hospital or school. So what about the numbers? So they started with 2 people in 1839, and by the beginning of the 20th century, they were about 365, as far as I remember. And these numbers could change from time to time, and especially in times of crisis. For example, during the Crimean War of 1853-56, 255 extra filles de charité were demanded by the Ottoman authorities and the French state. So they came to Istanbul to go to Crimean war zone, especially. So you can see here my map. I hope, yes, I think you can see now. So at the bottom left, you can see the old Istanbul, the old town, the center of Istanbul before the 19th century. But the place that the stars, the yellow stars are concentrating on is the new center of the city in the 19th century, around Galata. So where you can see a high number of stars is the area of Karaköy and Galata. And at the very bottom of the stars, you see Karaköy, Saint Benoît, the central house. And you can see at the top of the you see the countryside. This is an extreme example. It is called Polonezköy. It was found by the Polish migrants, and the Polish migrants had bought their area from the Lazaris, where the Sisters of Charity had found a farm there. And also, by the second half of the 19th century, some of the residents of Istanbul began to move to the Anatolian side of Istanbul, and you can see the middle, Üsküdar, you can see maybe, and it is the area where the Catholics began to settle, and the Sisters of Charity too. And on the left side of Bosphorus, at top, you can see another yellow star, Bebek. This is the area where the summer residences of foreign consulates were located. And this is also in the area where the Protestants, American Protestant missionaries were located. That is why the Sisters of Charity had found another house there too. So here you can see, maybe you can see in more detail the central part of where the Sisters of Charity were located. So from the bottom of the map, you can see Karaköy. This is the central house. At the top, you can see Lape Hospital. Okay, the star at the top. This is 1 hour's walking distance, and it is one of the most important hospitals of the Sisters of Charity. So now you can see the institutions. So these are the institutions that the Sisters of Charity opened and ran, except for, you can see, Beyoğlu Municipal Hospital, dated 1865. This was an institution of the Ottoman state, where the Sisters of Charity worked regularly and where they initiated the foundation of the hospital. And other than that, all of them were the institutions of the Sisters of Charity. So all these institutions were frequently relocated for several reasons. Due to lack of space, for example, the orphanages were not, the place for the orphans was not sufficient enough. They were relocated due to disasters such as fire, for example, the Great Fire of 1865 in Pera, and political disputes. When there is a disagreement between France and the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman authorities demanded the Sisters of Charity to end their missions, which did not actually happen in most of the cases. And you can see this is just an example of the population that they served, and this is a prototype of the population. Actually, this is not an extra example, we can say. So they are serving to the patients and the poor, to all the nations. But I just realized that the Muslims, they apply, yes, to the municipal hospital, and also they apply to the dispensaries. But generally, these are the non-Muslims which are applying to the hospitals of the Sisters of Charity. I just realized a difference in these terms. So wars and epidemics had two consequences for the activities for the nuns, for the sisters. As their competence in caring for the sick was recognized due to these instances, it became easier for them to open their institutions and receive support from the Ottomans. And two, it became possible for them to see patients in Ottoman hospitals outside their own institutions. So they worked in field institutions, field hospitals, public buildings turned into asylum or hospitals during the wars. And they also worked in for example, in mosques in times of crisis. And generally the mosques were used when there was a great amount of migrants after a disaster or a war. So there too, we can see Sisters of Charity caring for the patients or poor people. So you can see these Sisters of Charity at Beylerbeyi Military Hospital during the 1877-78 Russo-Ottoman War. This was a military hospital amongst the 14 hospitals that the Sisters of Charity worked at that moment. And now I'm just going to briefly show you some pictures about the institutions that they worked, and most of them, as I said, survive today. This is Saint Benoît. It is today a school, Saint Benoît College, and this was a center. Every sister coming from France had to come here, and it was from this institution that they proceeded to their future missions. And this was a key point of contact with the consulate, the priests, and the people of Constantinople. And it was a center of all institutions in the missions in the Ottoman Empire. And the building had suffered from the disasters in the Ottoman Empire, the fires, and the epidemics especially. And as I said, it is today a school, but it has a dispensary which serves the students, but also the poor of Galata with the support of Caritas. And this is the second great institution, and this is an orphanage and school at Bebek as a result of the rivalry between the Protestant missionaries and the Catholics. And today, this building survives, and it is located in a closed housing project. And this is Sand and Sand form. It does not it did not survive. So this is the countryside that I showed you on the map. There are about 20 orphan boys were learning under the supervision of 4 sisters. Were learning catechism, arithmetics, reading and writing, but also becoming becoming a farmer. Basically, we know that the Lazarus sold this area to the Polish. So in the end, it became a Polish area at the end. So Taksim French Hospital, the building survives today exactly at the same facade as you can see, and it is today the French consulate. So this hospital had to move several times throughout the century. It was aiming specifically to give healthcare to French sailors, and the institutions was reorganized several times, and finally it's moved to another area nearby. It changed names several times, and the last name was Pasteur Hospital, and now it is the Pasteur Residences. Another institution which changed places and names several times, this was an orphanage and school, and at the end it turned out to be the Saint Puchery private school for boys, and it survives today as a school. And I need to repeat, yes, that in these orphanages, they were also given simple health services such as pharmacy, dispensary, or they were caring for the children. And in some of them, some French ophthalmologists were visiting regularly the institutions and were receiving patients, let's say once a day for free. Another house, we know that there was a house at Yeni Kapı in the Old Town, near the Old Town. It was a school for girls, and the rest is the question mark. And they also, as I said, formed a school, a house, a school, and a boys' orphanage at the Asian side. That is the House of Üsküdar or Bağlarbaşı, and it changed names several times again. And the building survives today. As you can see, it belongs to Hazar Education and Cultural Solidarity Association. And this is Lape Hospital. It is important because it is the first modern psychiatry hospital of Turkey, and it still serves as a psychiatry hospital. And it was built after the success of the Sisters of Charity in healthcare and patient care in the Crimean War. So the Sultan asked them what they were in need of, and they said they were in need of funds and area to form a new hospital. So in the end, they opened this Lape Hospital, where they accepted women and mentally ill mainly. And in this institution too, there were lots of workshops. There was orphanage, and they were giving all health services. As you can see, this is one of the sisters in Lape. Beyoğlu Municipal Hospital is different because it was an Ottoman institution, and they had to get on well with the Ottomans in the institutions. And Çukurbostan, Saint Joseph Orphanage, is an orphanage whose building still survives today. It's problematic because there was a restaurant, and the municipality evacuated the restaurant, and they are going to, I don't know, they are going to do something else. Artigiana is another, okay, yes, I've read. Artigiana is another institution for the hospice for the elderly. It has been a hospice for the elderly since the beginning. And St. George was still survives today. It's an Austrian hospital. It was founded by 2 Austrian Sisters of Charity. And the last one is Jeremiah Hospital, named after Monsieur Jeremy, who gave his earnings for the foundation of this hospital. and it still survives today, and it is on sale at the moment. It is empty. And I'm going to just finish with another question, whether they were welcome or not. With again around the fourth mine. Yes, the accounts of the Sisters of Charity and the Lazarist priests and the visitors, let's say, yes, they approve. They approved the accounts of Duran the Fourth Mine. They were accepted and welcomed by the Ottoman authorities, by the local people, and by the patients, especially in times of crisis. But there were some limits. The limits was these instances. First of all, when the diplomatic relations between France and the Ottoman Empire were strained, the sisters' work could be suspended. Their institutions were moved or closed down, and when they opened their institutions in the Muslim neighborhood, they were again prevented from working and asked to move. And finally, they began to move with the outbreak of the First World War and with the abrogation of the capitulations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jaren. I really appreciate that presentation. So we'll now move on to our second speaker, and I'll just quickly introduce him. Dr. Jörg Matthias Determann is an associate professor of history at Virginia Commonwealth University in Qatar. He also serves as an associate editor of the Review of Middle East Studies and as book review editor of the Journal of Arabian Studies. He holds a doctorate from the School of Oriental and African Studies, or otherwise known as SOAS, in the University of London, and 2 master's degrees from the University of Vienna. He is the author of 4 books, including Islam, Science Fiction, and Extraterrestrial Life and Space Science in the Arab World. Dr. Matthias, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Shoaib, for having me. Big thanks also to Ceren, to my fellow panelist. Thank you also to Rachel and to Rushdie and to everybody in the background who has made this event possible. Really, really excited to talk about astrobiology and Islam. Please allow me to share my screen. Wonderful. Thank you. I will now take you to the realm of the extraterrestrial. If you don't know what astrobiology is the study of life in the universe. It is a contraction between astronomy and biology. And as I hope to show today, there are some really interesting relations between this particular science and the religion of Islam. So if you've never heard of the term astrobiology, it is a term that is not as prominent as sort of other sciences like physics or chemistry, but it has been around since about the 1940s and 1950s. And areas, lands populated by many Muslims have been part of the story of this science. Around 1955, we already have a paper published by Gavril Tikhov, a member of the Academy of the Kazakh Socialist Soviet Republic, so what is today Kazakhstan, a Muslim majority country, an astronomer asking, is life possible on other planets? He himself had begun studying this question in the early 20th century when there was a broader fascination with the question of whether there could be life on Mars specifically, a question that has not really left us, right? We're still searching as humanity for either life on Mars or at least traces of past life on Mars, or at least the habitability of Mars as a planet. Gavril Tikhov, a Kazakhstan-based Russian scientist, he contributed to the field of astrobiology and even coined the term astrobotany, so the study of plant lives elsewhere in the universe. Since then, since the 1950s, astrobiology has taken off. There are many, many people in different countries, including Muslim majority countries, engaged in this work. There is an astrobiology network of Pakistan. Here's the website if you're interested in learning more about Nozair Khawaja or other people involved in this particular society. We haven't found life elsewhere in the universe, or at least we don't have undisputed evidence of it. As far as we have come so far in terms of mainstream scientific journals is we've discovered organic compounds, so the building blocks of life elsewhere in the solar system. For instance, on Enceladus, a moon orbiting Saturn. Recently, the search for life elsewhere in the universe has become ever more exciting through the discovery of thousands of planets outside of our solar system. For instance, there are various planets named after Kepler, which in this case refers to a space telescope that searched the sky for these kinds of objects. The space telescope in itself being named after an early modern astronomer and scientist. The Muslim world has also been involved in the hunt for planets outside of our solar system. There's an entire planetary system that has 7 planets called TRAPPIST-1, in whose discovery a multinational team was involved, including scientists from the Ukaimeden Observatory in Morocco, where the TRAPPIST North telescope is located. And we also have a scientist from the King Abdullah Center for Crescent Observations and Astronomy in the Mecca clock in Mecca, contributing and co-authoring this particular research paper. So clearly institutions that have Arab, Middle Eastern, as well as Islamic significance contributing to this work. Well, if you're still wondering, like many scientists, whether there are aliens out there, whether there's life elsewhere in the universe, as far as popular culture goes, the aliens are here, and they have been here for a very, very long time. Again, since around the 1940s and 1950s, when you had sort of a first wave of euphoria about unidentified flying saucers, UFOs, flying saucers, unidentified flying objects, we've had filmic portrayals of aliens visiting us, including places in the Muslim world, such as Istanbul. There is a movie about flying saucers over Istanbul from the 1950s. So here we have some Oriental elements, some Middle Eastern elements with a traditional Oriental dance, a belly dancing. There you can see the flying saucer with a cardboard box style robot climbing out of the UFO. And here you have the beautiful alien women. I guess you got a sense of the kind of imagination of the aliens in Turkey in the 1950s here. And the aliens have never really left us since. This is a clip here by the Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy that was organizing the FIFA World Cup, the Football World Cup, here in Qatar, that was held in November and December. And as part of the cultural programming, the state of Qatar made an animated television show that introduced world audience to Qatari culture by having an alien crash land in Qatar and then being introduced to Qatari culture by local people. And this is like an example. Kaukabani.
الو
يا بلادي من المشرق الى المغرب اريد اعطيك وطن.
الو اخو العيال يا ولد وشو؟
طريق منطقة كبلة 438B.
So Kepler 438b, one of the planets that was discovered in around 2015, making an appearance here in this official Qatari cultural promotion video of the FIFA World Cup. There are also various other shows that have been imported, such as Grandizer. That's a Japanese production, wildly popular in the Arab world, featuring UFOs, alien world. Grandizer here, you can also see it as an icon on Tahrir Square, issuing a warning to corrupt officials. So aliens have really been part of popular culture, and not just culture that, maybe is not always taken seriously by cultural critics, but even by art that has been exhibited in respectable venues. So one example is, for instance, the exhibition Space Mosque by Saks Afridi that is here on show in the Icon Gallery. works from this particular artwork have also been on display in Qatar at my own university, and this spring they will be on display as part of an exhibition by the Weltmuseum, the World Museum in Vienna, a general exhibition on science fiction across cultures. Saksafridi is also known for a series of artworks called Insider, Outsider, combining a UFO imagery with traditional carpet weaving. So UFOs, if you look at it, they are everywhere. ET culture has thoroughly invaded our planet. If you don't have time to go to exhibitions or even to look up old movies, you can just go on Instagram and see so many UFO-inspired artworks, alien-inspired artworks by artists, whether it's in Turkey, such as Murat Alpa, whether that's in Qatar, in the case of Lucid Credo, or in the case of Syria with Ayham Jabr. So, if aliens have been part of like our obsession, our human interests in science, in art, in culture, well, it is not surprising that we also find a lot of references to ET in theology. There is an official translation of the Quran produced in the 1980s by Saudi Arabia, in which there's a commentary on the first surah, the first chapter in the Quran, where it says, "Praise be to Allah, the cherisher and sustainer of the worlds." And the footnote here says, Allah cares for all the worlds. He has created worlds in the plural. Or there's another chapter of the Quran where a verse says, "And among his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth and the living creatures that he has scattered through them. And he has power to gather them together when he wills." And in this Saudi-sponsored Quranic commentary, it says, "Life is not confined to our one little planet. It is a very old speculation to imagine some life like human life on the planet Mars. Though no scientific demonstration is possible, it is reasonable to suppose that life in some form or other is scattered through some of the millions of heavenly bodies scattered through space. What a wonderful sign of Allah, the Almighty, who created such countless beings, has surely the power to bring them together." So here, extraterrestrial life being confirmed as being in alignment with Islamic scripture and being even seen as evidence for God's power. Saudi Arabia obviously has been dominated by one particular Islamic tradition, and that is the Wahhabi tradition, a Sunni tradition, part of the Hanbali school of law. But even traditions very distant from that also read extraterrestrials in the Quran. An example is Mirza Tahir Ahmad of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, a community that is so far away from a mainstream Sunni Islam that it's not even considered Muslim by many Sunni Muslims, for instance, in Pakistan. But the head of this particular community published a book, Revelation, Rationality, Knowledge, and Truth, in which an entire chapter is dedicated to the Quran and extraterrestrial life. And here a verse is being interpreted saying that the Quran speaks not only of the possibility of extraterrestrial life, but it categorically declares that it does exist. So again, here, affirmation of extraterrestrial life by scripture, according to at least one prominent reading. We know a lot about UFO culture, although not nearly as much as we want to. We obviously have a lot of scientific research that is being published, but we don't have nearly as much research as we would hope on the relationship between astrobiology and Islam. there's a chapter by Muzaffar Iqbal on Islamic theology and meets ETI. It's part of a larger volume on astrotheology. But apart from that, not much has appeared. Because of that, Shoaib, our wonderful host today, and I actually organized a conference on Islamic perspectives on exotheology. Here you can see the call for papers and our conference booklet designed by Shoaib. Here with our table of contents, where we've been trying to gather together as many perspectives by different scholars of Muslim theology, scholars of Islam on extraterrestrials. The conference was, at least in my opinion, a great success. We've got some wonderful papers from it, and currently Shoaib and I are working on publishing those papers as an edited volume. I'm very, very happy to say that we've got a contract for an edited volume signed with IB Tauris and an imprint of Bloomsbury. And we've got some really interesting chapters lined up, again, based on the conference, studying different parts of the huge and large, wide and broad Islamic tradition and its relationships with extraterrestrials. This work is still in progress. Shoaib and I, we are still trying to put the chapters together and write an introduction. So I would love to hear any comments, any thoughts, any views of yours on this topic. And I would love to include some of your feedback in our edited volume. Thank you so much, everybody, again. Thank you, Shoaib. Thank you, Ceren, Rachel, Tanvir, Rushdie, for making our talk possible today. Big thanks also to the people from IB Tauris and from my university, VCU, for supporting this venture. Big thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Matthias. Now we'll hopefully open the floor to the wider audience. So if you have any questions, you may come online and ask. Both of our speakers now are locked and loaded for defending their positions and their arguments. This is not a mini Viva. This is a very informal chat show. So we'll start off with a few questions. So my initial question for the both of you is, what drove your interest to looking into these areas? Why and what attracted you? I mean, like, there's 1,000 things you could look into, but why these topics? We'll start off with you, Dr. Jörg. Go ahead.
Well, with me, I've had a childhood interest in science fiction, especially space-themed science fiction. So I've watched Star Trek, Star Wars from an early age, and I still read Arabic science fiction to my 3-year-old daughter, Maria. So an interest in science fiction has accompanied me all my life, and that has perhaps engendered interest in, is there life elsewhere in the universe? And if it does exist, what does this mean for us on our planet? What does this mean for how we see ourselves as humans in the cosmos?
All right, cool, perfect. Dr. Jaren?
For me, about the Sisters of Charity in general, just as I said at the beginning of my presentation, wherever I looked, I saw them, first of all. And they were there in the Ottoman Empire, for example, before Florence Nightingale. Florence Nightingale, we know that she initiated the modern nursing profession after the Crimean War, and she has a museum in Selimiye in Üsküdar today, and she's very highly appreciated amongst the professionals of healthcare today. But for the Ottoman case, I saw that the nursing profession was there well before Florence Nightingale, and that was basically the Sisters of Charity. Yes, they were high in number in general, and they were everywhere in all the institutions, and they were in all the Ottoman institutions in especially times of crisis. And unfortunately, today we know what times of crisis and catastrophes mean, and how we are in need of all kinds of help. That is why I wanted to work on them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll take the opportunity at the moment to invite the other members of the network to come online, so that everyone can see them, but also they may also present and raise their own questions. Hi, Rachel. We can't hear you, Rachel.
Unmuted now. Sounds good?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Welcome, Rachel. Welcome, Alper. Hi, guys. Right. Go ahead. Ask your questions, guys. Rachel, let's start off with you.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you both so much for your presentations. I have to say, one of the things that struck me was the difference of the portrayal, at least in the beginning of Matthias's presentation, and what Ceren had presented in terms of the images of science, because the sisters were, of course, the image of the most pragmatic, serious, scientific practitioners, and then we had those, imaginative aliens, and of course those were also different images of women in addition to different images of science and society, and I just thought that was so illustrative of the different ways that both science maybe and women have been portrayed in different sciences, of either being really, so helpful, exactly what we need, and really solving the crucial issues, and also so potentially alien and temptress and bringing us in wrong directions. So that was something that jumped out at me. And of course, then there were other much more serious relations to interpretations of the Quran and elsewhere, which brought extraterrestrial life to a different dimension. But that was one question I wanted to throw out there, if that resonated at all with different tensions that you faced at all in any of your research.
Yeah, I guess it's a really interesting question. Ceren is obviously the expert on Turkish history, but yeah, I mean, obviously what we see in between, let's say, the First World War, the time before the First World War, and then the end of the Second World War, right between, let's say, the 1900s and then the 1950s, are huge changes in, for instance, the kind of portrayal images that the Turkish government has been trying to promote in terms of women, that from the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, again, there was this, significant promotion by the Turkish government of the image of the Western woman, the unveiled woman, the Turkish woman that would indeed look like a Hollywood woman, right? Just so if we have these belly dancing or these erotic aliens, right, that I was showing to you, yes, there's Oriental Middle Eastern music to the belly dancing, but otherwise, in terms of the showcasing of the aliens, they could sort of appear like that in a Hollywood movie from the 1950s just as much. And I think there you can see the proximity in the 1950s in particular by the Turkish government to the United States, to NATO, to sort of Western culture more broadly, and definitely a shift from the time before the First World War. That's my point of view on that, but obviously Ceren is the expert on Turkish history.
No, but I agree with you. It is related to the political orientation of Turkish Republic, first of all, and also I think it is related to the general experience of the World War. So first of all, the World War changed everything for not only Turkey but all the countries that made part of the war, and it is maybe I'm going to come to another dimension. It is maybe related to how we see science itself. You talked about, Rachel, the different depictions of science in these two presentations. So science itself began, I think, after the disasters, again another disaster of the World War, began to be open to criticism and to be open to different kinds of depictions. This was not the case in the 19th century, but the And I can see that from what I read, especially I read 1930s and 40s, not the 50s. I don't know well with the 50s, but in 1940s, 30s and 40s, yes, there is a great orientation towards science in Turkish Republic, but this understanding is a little bit different. Even if the codes are the same, it is a little bit different from the late 19th century before the war. So it is more open to criticism.
Thank you, guys. Alper, you said you had a question. Go ahead.
Yes. First of all, thanks for these presentations. Jörg, is it Jörg? Or am I
Either
torturing
Jörg
German?
or Matthias.
Okay. So I didn't know Turkish science fiction movies had that much belly dancing. I was surprised to see that. But other than that, it was perfect. I learned a lot from both of you guys. Thanks again. I have a question for Ceren. So you said there is this criticism coming from the secular French circles towards Sisters of Charity. I was going to ask if is there any kind of nationalistic criticism that targets Sisters of Charity because they are serving Muslims and Turks, and it's like waste of time and energy and money. So was there that kind of a criticism?
From the part of the sisters, that was not the case. So they did not react to serve the Turks or the Muslims. So they did not see it as a loss of time. As far as I know, from the annals, from their own accounts. So I did not read any other sources than the the Prime Ministry archives and the annals about this matter. But the sisters say that they are affiliated with the Lazarist congregation, and the Lazarist priests tell them not to deal with the matters of religion with the local people. So this is an area of the Lazarist priests, I guess. So they are just told to serve, to give healthcare, to give education, and language is an important part of mission, of course, but they are not allowed to talk about religious affairs with the people they serve. So they are also concentrated on care that they give, and because giving care for them is a kind of praying to God. It's a kind of prayer. So that is why they're not dealing with conversion, if that is what you are thinking about. There are some sisters who were afraid of coming to Ottoman lands, okay, because they did not know, they did not have Twitter, they did not know what would happen in this Oriental world, that they just had some rumors, and that's all. And I have read that one of them, I've just seen one case in which one of the sisters just changed idea and returned back before getting the boat. Okay, and the other ones voluntarily came to Istanbul and to the missions, to the Eastern missions. And I have not seen anything indicating any kind of criticism about that. But I should be cautious about the annals, because the annals that I read are typed. They're not handwritten. That is why I should always be thinking about I may be reading some part of the story. So I'm avoiding giving generalizations about this matter of conversion, but I have read several times that they were told not to deal with religion, with the topics of religion with the patients or the local people. From the side of the Ottomans, especially Abdülhamid was very critical of the existence of missionaries, but they were not expelling them. They were accepting the services. Abdülhamid was also accepting and welcoming the services of the missionaries, but As opposed, he was forming his own religious groups. I'm not talking about kinds of congregations of communities, but he was promoting the idea of pan-Islamism. And this idea of pan-Islamism was everywhere in the daily life, in the schools, in the Hamidiye mosques. They were named after him, and they were everywhere, and they are still everywhere in Istanbul and in Anatolia too. And pan-Islamism was, again, not only related to religion itself, but it was pragmatic, especially pragmatic after the Russo-Ottoman War of 1877-78, because after the war, the Ottoman Empire lost a vast territory in the European lands, and the people, the Muslims living in the European lands, migrated to the lasting lands of the Ottoman Empire, which means a higher concentration of Muslims in the country. So the marvel that would stick the country together against the Eastern question, which means the dissolution of the empire, would be pan-Islamism, the politics of pan-Islamism. And the politics of pan-Islamism necessitated a rivalry between the missionaries, not an open one, but a symbolic and pragmatic one. I hope I could give an answer to your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ceren. So the next question is for Matthias, and this is by Dr. Abdullah Galadari, who unfortunately couldn't come online because of technical issues. So I'm asking on his behalf. So Matthias, this is for you. If some Muslims today already accept the idea that extraterrestrials is aligned with Muslim scriptures, do they have any perspective about whether da'wah or apologetics should be made to them, since the Quran's main audience are the sons of Adam, rather than other creatures? What do you reckon?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A question that we will also explore, or at least touch on, probably in the book that Shoaib and I are co-editing on Islamic theology and extraterrestrial life. So the Quran is not very explicit in terms of just speaking about extraterrestrial and the nature. There is a lot of room for interpretation, and we will explore that. But sort of in terms of explicit notion of other beings, right, intelligent beings that we have in the Quran, we would have the jinn as well as the angels, right? And certainly with angels and jinns, we know they can turn towards God or they could turn away from God, right? We could have angels or jinn that are Muslims, that are obedient to and submissive to God, but we also have jinn and angels that can rebel against God, right? So if aliens are either like humans, or because they're intelligent like jinn, or perhaps even like angels, like I could at least imagine that one could invite them to follow the Islamic message, right? If da'wah is literally invitation. But that's just my thought. Obviously, you might have theological differences on that point, theological differences that we would love to explore in our book. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Matthias. All right, Rolly, your question is up next. Go ahead.
Perhaps this is too specific, because while we're watching this, I'm discussing this with my friend Daniel, and we're going back and forth about scholars in the Muslim tradition that dealt with outer space in general and with life, Al-Farabi and so on, and he reminded me of Al-Kindi and his treatment of the rays and the magnetic influence and so on, and he's reminding me of a universe that's full of emanations and interactions between entities, my question basically there is since the universe in that worldview is so full of interactions, so full of happenings, do you think there's any connection there between the classical, non-philosophical, the general, astrological conception of the world in Muslim culture, and the astrobiology, meaning not just the appearance of aliens specifically in one quote or another, but whether there's a conception of us being in the world alone or being in a world that is because in the tradition in other cultures, like for example in modern in the Christian culture, or what comes after the Christian culture, the secular European culture, it took a while for them to realize that or still today, the universe is big, large, and empty, and there's not much happening. And now we're starting to feel as if there's a lot going on there. And what I'm getting, the feeling that I'm getting from the Muslim tradition is that it's always been rife with interactions. Even before you have a specific philosopher that comes up and says, yes, there is this quote here. And so with what you've explored with the Muslim tradition, how would you say is the conception of the universe? Is it a full universe, or is it like, specific places where you find someone coming to visit?
That's a really, really good question. So the classical Islamic scientific ideas, right, the medieval Islamic ideas, are in large parts like drawing on like the earlier traditions, right, that in the Middle East, in South Asia, in the Mediterranean, and that includes especially Hellenism, right? So Islam in general just owes a huge debt to Hellenistic culture, and of course Hellenistic culture has been shaped by the views of ancient Greek philosophers, Plato, but especially Aristotle. So a lot of and then also like Ptolemy, so these Hellenistic thinkers. So a lot of classical Islamic scientific thought would obviously depart and develop like Hellenistic thought, but that's sort of one of the origins of it. So if you look at the Ptolemaic worldview, like Earth is in the center, right? So the traditional view was that the sun and the other planets all around revolve around the Earth that is in the center. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Earth is the best place, right? Just because Earth is in the center doesn't mean it's the best place. You can also understand it as, Earth being quite mediocre, Earth being in the middle, that there are 7 heavens above us, and that there might be 7 hells below us. And Earth is, somewhere in the middle, which means it's not the worst place. It's not hell, but it's not one of the 7 heavens above us either, right? It's not the special place either. Like a strong notion that you had in classical antiquity as well as in Islam is the idea that there is more than one world, right? And God being Lord of the worlds in the plural is an expression of that. And there is obviously argumentation of, what do these worlds mean, right? Is this the world of the humans? Is it the world of the jinn? Are like the 7 heavens, the 7 earths, the 7 hells, are those the worlds that we're talking about? In general, though, they're like the universe in that classical perception is a universe that's full, right? That there isn't that much vacuum in there. That's almost like a more modern notion of space being the vacuum, right? In the traditional classical view, you have almost like there's something everywhere, and so you would have plants or animals or minerals, right? This is the traditional Hellenistic division of beings. So yeah, the classical Islamic conception definitely being a world that is full and abundant and interesting. Does this answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, once you consider this kind of heritage, and then what they do with it, I mean, but then it opens up the question of how does this influence literature? How does this influence, the imagination of people? Where do they take it? But that's a whole nother thing that we should do.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much, Rolly. So I think it's time to come to a close of this webinar. Before I thank all the participants, I would like to say I enjoyed this a lot. It was very interesting to see that we had someone talking about what's out there in the future potentially, and we had another person talking about what was happening in the past. And I think that pluralism, diversity is what the MENA network is all about. What we want to try and do is showcase as much as we can about what's being done in the interface of science and religion in different parts of the MENA region, as well as about the MENA region. And this ties in with what I said earlier. We currently have an active call for papers. The deadline has not expired, where we are inviting papers. These could be graduate theses. These could be published papers recently, within the last couple of years or so, that we are open to considering for prize money. As a minimum amount, if you are selected as a very good paper, if your paper is selected as a good paper, that is, you will be awarded £1,000. And if your paper is considered as the best out of the entire set of papers, then there'll be a further £2,000 award attached to that. So do make sure that you look us up. The call for papers is floating up and about. So I just wanted to emphasize that again, that that is still there. Please do send us any questions if you may have any. We'll be more than happy to address those. Myself, Rachel, Abdullah, Alper, Rolly, any of us. And with that cleared out, I want to thank both the presenters, Dr. Ceren, again, I hope I mentioned that and pronounced that well, Dr. Matthias, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate the time that you took out and sharing some of your research expertise. And I hope this invites further dialogue and interest from the wider community. Rachel, Alper, Rolly, thank you for attending. And also Abdullah, who couldn't make it because of technical difficulties. And also our main graphics designer, who's behind the scenes and has been handling everything. Rishi, I don't know if you want to show your face, but he's been like the hidden star of this project, and he's done all our graphics, all our CFPs, all our videos. I think he's too shy to come on board, so so we'll leave it at that. But thank you very much, guys. Oh, there he is. He's popped up. There he is. Yeah, there we go. So thank you. And this little picture right here, this is what MENA represents: diversity, multiplicity, and hopefully further room for exchange and dialogue. Thank you, guys. We hope to see you again in a future event. Until then, have a good day. Bye-bye.